You're listening to Eating for Eden, Episode 5. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. When I use the word diet, I typically mean it as a shorthand for dietary pattern, thus not something that one does for a month or so in order to shed a few pounds. Rather, a diet or dietary pattern as a noun is a way of eating. The trouble with dieting as a verb is for another conversation, however. Today, I'd like to focus on how to make plants delicious so that eating a wide variety and abundance of plant foods can easily become normal and sustainable, an everyday, long-term diet or dietary pattern. Regardless of whether or not you enjoy cooking, for any particular way of eating to stick, you have to like what you're putting into your mouth. Before getting into my top 10 tips for tasty plant-based eating, I'd like to share a brief personal anecdote. One of the things that has stood out to me over the past few years is how much my husband, Daniel, has come to embrace plant-based eating. He's no longer just going with the flow as he was at first. He has come to prefer it himself. Initially, he was graciously eating what I placed before him at mealtime or teaming up with me in the kitchen, cooking what I had planned. Over time, though, not only did the habits of his taste buds change, more on this back in episode 4, but he also had a revelation. It's all about flavor. Meat in itself was not tastier than plants. What made any dish so tasty was the way it was cooked and seasoned. Most of us simply have been raised in environments where meals without meat were not considered meals at all. But look around the globe. You'll see plenty of cultures making plants, and delicious plants at that, the center of their cuisines. Daniel came to realize that plants could shine in similar, maybe even better, ways than dishes based in meat and dairy. What astounded and delighted me was the first time I heard him declare that often the plant-based menu options are more delicious than the animal-based ones. Skeptical? Give it a try. You need only taste and see. Now let's get into the kitchen, shall we? Whether you're interested in strategies for your own eating or in finding ways to help bring your family along, these 10 tips will be like a set of tools you can wield with increasing skill as you try them out and experience the benefits firsthand. And remember this key point. It's all about flavor. So let's talk about how to give your plants the best flavor of their lives. Here are my top 10 tips for making plants wildly delicious. Tip number 1, cook beans and lentils at home. Friends, if you're convinced you don't really like beans, I can almost guarantee you that it's because you haven't had them cooked properly. The difference between canned beans and home-cooked beans is like the difference between a loaf of grocery store sandwich bread and homemade sourdough bread. It's night and day. Sure, it's a bit more effort than grabbing a can opener, but with instant pots and freezers, there's really no good excuse to deny your taste buds of this treat. Plus, it's way less hands-on than making bread. Cooking legumes at home offers several distinct taste benefits. First, you get to cook them to your liking. While all beans should be cooked until they can be smashed with a fork, because undercooked beans can cause digestive issues, I've found that some canned beans go beyond this point, making for a mushy, unpleasant experience. You can catch them before they've gone too far if you cook them yourself. But if you don't, and they do go too far, you can always turn mushy beans into hummuses and dips. Second, you can season them as they cook. When purchasing heirloom dried beans from Rancho Gordo, I recently learned about what they call cooking beans in the Rancho Gordo style. This includes first sautéing aromatics, so think onions, garlic, perhaps even carrots and celery, before adding the beans and water to a pot to cook. This infuses more flavor into the beans as they absorb those flavors as they cook and expand. What I've come to realize is I practically already have a delicious soup ready to go simply by cooking beans in this way. They're richly flavored, and they're quite versatile and have a lovely texture. Third, cooking beans at home means you get to try many more varieties than just what are on offer at grocery stores. There's a whole world of beautiful beans just waiting to be tried. Look online for gourmet heirloom varieties from retailers like Rancho Gordo. By the way, I have no affiliation at this point of recording, so I'm just a huge fan. Tip number 2, roast your veggies. Well, not all of them. Don't roast your romaine lettuce, but most vegetables absolutely shine when roasted. I mean, how many people have been converted into Brussels sprouts fanatics after trying them roasted? This can be as simple as slowly roasting whole sweet potatoes, allowing those natural sugars to caramelize, or chopping up a head of cauliflower and tossing it with a bit of oil, salt, and garlic powder. And don't forget fun combos like trays of mixed veg, such as onions, bell peppers, red potatoes, zucchini, asparagus, mushrooms. The possibilities are endless. Next time you take out a pot to boil or steam some veg, consider roasting it instead. But this is not to say that steaming and sautéing don't have their place. On to the next tip, number 3. Cook vibrant veg. While eating a variety of colors is important, this point has more to do with the end color of your veg. Another way of wording this tip is don't cook your veg to death. While roasting veg within an inch of its life can be pretty delectable at times, again, think of those crispy Brussels sprouts, using this approach when cooking on the stovetop is not wise. Respect the texture of your vegetables. A secondary tip to this is use color as a guide. Many veggies, especially green ones, will tell you when they are ready. Next time you sauté or steam broccoli or kale, pay attention to the color. As it cooks, it will reach peak vibrancy in its greenness, after which it will turn dull and continue to lose color from there. My favorite way to eat green veg like broccoli, kale, bok choy, and asparagus is to cook them until they just hit that peak vibrancy of color. That is the time to serve up and enjoy. Sad veg is sad to eat. Don't let your veg be sad. You deserve better than that, and so does your veg. So make it vibrant. Tip number 4, season appropriately. Some people are afraid of salt. Now, I don't want you to think that there is no upper limit of what is reasonable, and especially if you have a history of high blood pressure, there is certainly something to pay attention to when it comes to salt, but typically super high levels of sodium in our diets are coming in through ultra-processed foods and restaurant foods, not so much from home cooking. Seasoning appropriately comes in large part down to tasting as you go. If something tastes bland, see if a little salt improves its flavor. What salt does is enhance flavor. So with avocado, for instance, it makes the avocado taste more like itself. While salt enhances flavor, peppers add heat. As for black pepper, I advocate using it sparingly and thoughtfully. Overdoing it can make everything just taste the same. Too many people assume that all foods call for black pepper. This just isn't the case. Don't mask your food. Ask what it needs. Taste. Adjust. Taste. Adjust. Taste. Pay attention. You may want a slight element of heat in your dish. Should that come from black pepper? Maybe. From something more fiery like cayenne or red chili flakes, maybe even a hot sauce. Or perhaps from something more delicate like white pepper. As you cook and before you plate up, keep these words in mind. Taste and adjust. Over time, you will develop this kind of intuition as you're cooking. Also, always keep in mind that you can always add more salt or pepper later. It's nearly impossible to take it out, though. When in doubt, under-season and add more as needed. Tip number 5. Use spices and herbs. 3 words: flavor, flavor, flavor. There is a whole world of opportunity here, and you can house those possibilities in a spice cabinet. You can travel across the globe with just a few small jars. You can be subtle and controlled like the French, or you can be bold and unashamed like those in India, or anywhere in between. Alongside dried spices, embrace fresh herbs. Think rosemary, thyme, basil, cilantro, mint, dill, tarragon, oregano, and more. These can be purchased in little bundles in the produce section of grocery stores or even grown in a pot in the windowsill. So if you're a plant person, consider growing some herbs at home. Another flavor-enhancing addition, tip number 6, add acidity. If you've seen the 4-episode cooking documentary Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, this one will not surprise you. As I watched these episodes and delightedly took copious notes, it became apparent to me that acid was a much underappreciated element in my cooking. Even before watching it, I had learned to pay attention to acid to some extent. If something didn't taste quite right, I knew to ask if it needed salt, fat, or acid. But I didn't appreciate how important acid really is and how much it can change a dish. Acid is the difference between flat and vibrant, between meh and mmm. It can take some practice to get used to adding the right amounts, and even in remembering to consider it. But that's everything in cooking. You give things a try, taste as you go, and gain more confidence and joy as a result. Acid comes in numerous forms, and it can also make a difference to consider what acid to pair with what dish. For instance, if you're eating Mexican food, you may want to opt for lime. If French, maybe lemon, apple cider vinegar, or wine vinegars, those may be good go-tos. If you're making Japanese cuisine, rice vinegar is often a great option, though lime, lemon, and yuzu can work as well. All this being said, however, don't be afraid to experiment. Various acids can work wonders, even if you wouldn't think so. When in doubt, put a small bit of your food into a little bowl, add a touch of that acid that you have in mind, and taste it and see how it changes. Types of acid to add to your dishes include vinegars, so apple cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar, rice vinegar, red and white wine vinegars, sherry vinegar, and so forth. You also have the option of citrus fruits and those juices, so lemon, lime, grapefruit, oranges, and more. Kombucha, if you have it or make it, is also an interesting one. If you ferment your own veg, the briny liquid from something like sauerkraut or kimchi can serve as an acid too. Just remember that if you're using a ferment, it will also add salt, so just keep that in mind. Other acids will not. Additionally, you don't have to add liquid acid in all cases. Consider salads that you've had. Sometimes there are acidic elements that pop in particular bites, like segments of mandarin orange or pomegranate seeds. Foods that are acidic, like tomatoes, could be added in a whole form too, or crushed, like in order to add vibrancy of flavor to a dish. One final tip on this point. Most acids are finishing ingredients and should be added at the end just before serving. Cooking an acid dulls it, so if you're serving up a bowl of curry and rice, for example, add your lime juice or rice vinegar at the table just before tucking in. Tip number 7. Play with textural interest. Just like seasonings add depth and vibrancy, textures keep the eating experience interesting as well. When my husband and I first tried to find tasty ways of eating lentils, we found that too many dishes were just one note and one texture. Boring. Eventually, we found a dish that served up lentils with roasted carrots and a shredded spaghetti squash with all manner of fun Mediterranean toppings. This dish was far more texturally diverse and thus was much more enjoyable for us to eat than a bowl of all just one texture. What are the various textures to consider? While not exhaustive, some textures that show up in food include soft, such as sweet potato, mashed potatoes, polenta, cooked red lentils. We have crispy and crunchy, so things like fresh lettuce, fermented or pickled veg, toasted nuts and seeds, or toasted bread. One of my favorites is toothsome, such as al dente pasta or cooked whole grains, especially like wheat berries, things that have a bit of a bite to them, or maybe some rice, lightly sauteed and steamed broccoli that still has a bit of a crunch to it. And another one is creamy, so things like hummus, avocado, nut butters, cashew cream, and coconut milk. And there are others as well. Some items might even be a mixture of textures, like home-cooked beans, which can have a toothsome bite into their skin and yet a silky, creamy interior. Or homemade focaccia might have a crispy crust, but a soft and billowy interior. As you put together a dish or consider a recipe you've chosen to try out, look at the various ingredients or the finished product and ask if there's a major texture missing or if adding something could make the dish more appealing. Note, this doesn't mean that you always need to have every possible texture present. In fact, some of the most satisfying things to eat are actually pretty simple and don't have a ton of textural diversity. I mean, think of peanut butter and jelly on a slice of fresh sourdough bread. A whole lot of soft and creamy, but there is diversity in the acid of the jam and the richness of the peanut butter. So perhaps diversity is a broader takeaway here. Diversity, whether in texture or overall flavor, or both. One last thing I'll add here goes back to tip 3 about cooking vibrant veg. Sometimes our foods develop an unpleasant texture due to how we've cooked them or otherwise prepared them. Or it could even be because we're trying to use something that's under or overripe. Think of a hard avocado or a stiff, kind of green tasting mango. On the other hand, consider an overly mushy banana or greens and herbs that have wilted in your fridge. This is something to pay attention to as well. Tip number 8. Temperature matters. Some things are meant to be eaten hot, others cold. Still others at room temperature. For instance, a lovely eggplant caponata made with a variety of abundant summer vegetables along with capers and olives is splendid on bread at room temperature. The dish is first cooked, then chilled in the refrigerator, both of which are vital steps to making it what it is, but it's actually best eaten at room temperature. Attending to matters of temperature can mean the difference between meh and wow in an eating experience. So, plan accordingly. Tip number 9. Eat produce in season. Have you seen asparagus on sale for just $1 or $2 a pound? If so, this typically occurs in early spring. How about mangoes that go for $2 or $3 for $1 in the summer? Produce is both the least expensive and the most delicious when it is in season. So we've got a win-win here. Once you start to eat this way and pay attention, you'll notice a lot. Sweet potatoes and winter squashes taste so much better in fall and winter than during the rest of the year. There are so many delicious varieties of citrus available from usually December to February, and oranges that you may never even heard of. And tomatoes, don't even get me started on tomatoes. If you've never had a tomato ripened on the vine from someone's garden or a nearby farm, you are in for a treat. Rather than asking yourself what you feel like cooking, look for sales at the grocery store or what's being featured at a local farm stand for what's in season. And tip number 10, get creative with how you use ingredients. This may be potentially my favorite tip, and maybe why I've saved it for last here, kind of crowns the rest of them. Have you ever seen the cooking show Chopped? I love this show because creativity and adaptability are at the core of the cooking experience. For each round, appetizer, entree, and dessert, the chefs must incorporate 4 mystery basket ingredients into their dishes, and they change for each round. I have learned so much from this show and often get inspired to think creatively when I'm cooking with leftover or stray ingredients in my fridge and pantry. One of the key questions the judges will ask themselves when judging the dishes is whether and how the mystery basket ingredients have been transformed. So not just kind of thrown on top as they've been given, but transformed into something new. Transformation is like a plant-based cook's superpower. There are truly endless possibilities. The sky is really the limit. When we bring ourselves creatively to the kitchen, there's no telling what kind of scrumptious dishes might grace our tables. But I'm not a good cook, some of you may be thinking. Or, I'm not creative in the kitchen, I always have to follow a recipe. We all start somewhere. And sure, some of us may have more natural creative knack when it comes to food, but I think we can all learn and improve our skills and intuition in this area. One of the key pieces of advice I always give when I'm asked about developing one's intuition in the kitchen is this: pay attention. For example, what was the most unique thing that you recently ate out at a restaurant and really enjoyed? What made it so special? When we start to notice things like new flavor combinations or creative uses of ingredients and so forth, we're able to try recreating some version of those experiences in our own kitchens. Next, try things. Whether from a cookbook, a food blog, or a friend's meal plan, find interesting recipes and try them out. Plus, don't be afraid to tweak things. I nearly always change something about a recipe. As you try things, you'll fail at times, and other times you'll succeed marvelously. This is all part of the exciting journey, and you'll grow in confidence as you continue to pay attention and give things a try. All right, friends, there you have it. My top 10 tips for making plant-based meals delicious. I hope you hop into your kitchen soon and give a few of these a try. No need to jump into all 10 at once. Maybe just choose one or two to pay attention to for a week or so and see how it elevates your meals. As always, friends, start where you are, do what you can, and build from there. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.